I mean, okay, it's began. You speak Spanish better than me, so don't worry about that. So, yeah. Well, let's begin. As I mentioned, this first part will be more like personal questions, like your developer path and stuff like that, and whatever you want to add. So the first question is, how did you start working in IT, and like when was it the moment that you decide like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do for a living?
Yeah, so I started playing with code when I was very young, when I was about 13 years old. And I heard a neighbor say, check out my website. I was like, ooh, you can have one of those. And so I went home and started looking up how to make websites. And I fell in love with it right there. And I started playing around with code a lot in school. And then I realized, ooh, I could major in this. And so I majored in computer science in university. And that sealed the deal. I knew that I wanted to code and be in a software engineer and in a technical field as soon as I graduated.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the amount of stuff that you can do with just like code. So you can make things from scratch. I think that
you feel so powerful.
Yes. And so what's your role in Netlify? Like, what does a director of developer experience do on there every day?
That is a great question because my job changes all the time. So currently at Netlify, we try to make the developer experience great for all developers. And so our team has a lot of different focuses where I mostly do React and Next.js and some other frameworks. Some of my teammates do Vue and Nuxt, some do Angular, some do 11t, all the different frameworks that we can cover. And we try to make as many pieces of content and tutorials and information about these frameworks so that developers who are using Netlify can use them in the best way and understand it in the best way. So in my job from week to week, I might have a few days of meetings. Today was a big meeting heavy day for me. But when I'm not in meetings, I am typically either coding, working on some kind of demo, making a blog post, giving a talk, speaking on a podcast, speaking with people, and I have a couple developers who report to me, and so I'm their manager and help them with that sort of thing. I wear a lot of hats, and so it can be a lot of different things, but it's nice and interesting and fun because there's so many things that I get to do, and I'm never really bored. Stressed sometimes, but never really bored.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun, a lot of stuff, like you can never get bored.
Yeah.
And I see that you do like a lot of teaching there. So what was the first thing that you have ever taught, like in IT?
I think HTML and CSS. So when I was in college, I started doing a lot of peer mentoring, and so I was helping other students with Java and with C++. I don't use those anymore. And so I did do a lot of that, but the first class that I taught was in HTML and CSS, and the first big tutorial that I wrote was HTML and CSS. I actually was a part of a program many years ago. I think this was 8 years ago or something, where it was through Twilio. They called it Twilio Heroes. And with Twilio Heroes, they trained you to be a good educator, developer advocate in the tech industry. And in this program, they basically said, okay, here's how you write a good blog post, go. And so you learned how to write a blog post there. And so it was a really great program to be a part of. And that's when I first started teaching. And because of that tutorial that I wrote, I ended up making an online class with my sister where she and I made a video course together teaching HTML and CSS. And I used to teach kids a lot in the community as well. And that program was so great. Sadly, they had to shut it down, but I ended up recreating it at one of my jobs. And at that job, we trained a bunch of developers on how to write better and stuff. And I'd like to do that again, but maybe someday.
Yeah, I mean, who knew that back then when they taught you how to write a blog post, you would still be writing blog posts now for a living?
I know, for real.
And what's like the best part of teaching, like if you had to choose?
I really love seeing people understand something. I used to teach a lot in person. You can't now because of a pandemic, but when I used to travel all over the world teaching workshops, and it was so exciting to be able to explain a concept and see people go, oh, and just get that moment, that aha moment where it makes sense to them and they understand. And I love being able to help people get to that point. It's a little different online. I still try to teach, and I still enjoy teaching. And so instead, it's more just like people tweeting saying, I learned a lot. I'm like, yay, it's something. So I definitely prefer teaching in person if I can, just because it's really great talking to people. But in general, I just love seeing people take something they learned and running with it and doing great work with it.
Yeah, I mean, being like not being in person, it's like so different than like virtual events, but at least like that gives us the possibility to have like events like this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I've been able to meet so many people in the past year and a half that I wouldn't normally get to meet because we do the events like this. And so it's happy and sad. It's sad because I don't get to go see all of you in person, but it's happy because I can easily talk to anybody.
Yeah, it's kind of bittersweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish you could have like 50 and 50, 50 virtual, 50
yeah.
in person.
Someday that would be great.
Yeah. And well, talking about like community events, how did you get involved in that? Because when you start in your career, for example, like I think if I was a junior developer, how can I begin participating in all these communities?
Yeah, it's something that it's like a snowball, where as the snowball goes down the hill, it gets much bigger. It starts with very little things. And a lot of times podcasts and meetups and hackathons, a lot of community events, they're looking for speakers, but they don't know how to find speakers. Or you might want to speak at something, but you're not sure where to look. And I think that's the hardest part. And there are some solutions out there, but nothing quite that sticks much, where you kind of have to put yourself out there and say, I would like to speak at events. Here are some of the topics I can speak about, and just start putting your name out there. And with some conferences, like for example, Jamstack Conf, I help with that one. We were going through the call for papers, the CFP, just today, saying, oh, this person's a first-time speaker. We should give them a slot so they can get good practice in. And we love being able to do that, and a lot of organizers do too. And so if you want to be a speaker for the first time, it's really just a matter of saying that you want to, and you'd be surprised how many people might say, oh, well, I don't have a place for you, but my friend does. And casting a wide net for people to find you, because there's so many meetups out there, and again, hackathons, all these events where they could really use help. And for myself, I started speaking at events. I wasn't speaking to adult developers. I was speaking to middle school students. I started myself just speaking to kids, saying, tech is cool. Look at this cool stuff you can do. Wow. Just to younger kids. But then as I grew up, as I got older, I started speaking to high school students, and then I started speaking to college students, and then I started speaking to other professionals. And as I moved up in my career, I still like talking to the middle school students and the high school students, college students, but it's a great way to start. And that's how I got started. And if you are okay with the small events, you can always start building up more and more of your speaking practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have like an event every day or something.
I have so many events. It's unhealthy, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know this, but not everyone here, but I started speaking at communities and being part of communities because I saw Cassidy at the Women of React Conf.
My heart.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with you. It's just like that. It's seeing a call for papers or contacting with an organization, and it's just like that. It's just really easy, but you have to be looking for those opportunities.
And you can also reuse talks. That's something that not a lot of people realize. You can write one talk and ascend that to 10 different events. And chances are there's not a lot of overlap with these events. So keep reusing those talks and they get better over time. And you can always say, okay, I'm taking this talk and changing it a little bit for this event. Then I can change it even more. By the 10th time you give that talk, it's a completely different talk. But it allows you to continue to get better, get that practice, and also not spend too much time prepping because you're reusing a lot of content.
Yeah, something that happens to me when I see a call for papers is that I don't know what to talk about. How do you come up with so many topics?
It's very difficult sometimes. And so a lot of times what I do actually is I'll go look at GitHub issues, or I'll look at discussions where people are doing an AMA, one of those Ask Me Anythings and stuff. And I look, what are questions that people are asking? Because then as I look at the question, I'm just like, oh, people don't know how to do this. Great, I could give a talk on that. And so figuring out what questions people need answered is really, really helpful. And that's, even if you don't end up doing that exact one, it's good for getting your wheels turning in your mind, because there have been times where I think I'm going to give a talk about this subject, but I change it because I realize, wait, I just built this at work. I could talk about this thing at work and relate it to this topic. And so you can get very creative with it, but I like just going and seeing what people are asking on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I've never thought of that. So I'm always struggling, like, oh, I would love to speak here, but what can I talk about? Like there are so many topics.
Yeah. Well, and also I am a very active note taker. I have a notebook, an online notebook there on my computer that I write a lot of things down all the time, even if it's just like a joke that I haven't finished writing, where I'm like, this could be funny if I could figure out how to get there. I always write stuff down. Whenever you have even an inkling of an idea, if you just start writing it down, you never know where later you can go back to that and be like, that was a good idea, and then combine it with something else. And by constantly writing that down, you can get in a brainstorming flow all the time.
Yeah, you mentioned jokes. We all know that you love jokes. I'm subscribed to your newsletter, and we all get that joke of the week, and we love that. How do you make like these tech talks that are supposed to be like super serious? How do you make them fun and entertaining?
Yeah, and so that's another thing where I write down jokes all the time. Sometimes I don't write a full joke. I just write, this could be funny at some point. And so, like, for example, I was at a museum this past weekend and I was looking at the animal that was talking about the animal, the muskrat. I don't know much about the muskrat, but it could be funny to do Elon Muskrat at some point, like Elon Musk, and do an animal version or something. I don't know where that's going to be, but I wrote it down because you never know where that might be handy. And so sometimes it's very dumb stuff like that. But whenever I am in the mood to make a TikTok, I kind of just go to my ideas that I've written down and say, okay, which one of these could I turn into something that could be a funny video at some point?
Yeah, I mean, we all love your videos, your TikToks. I mean, who doesn't? All of your videos about women in IT are like super accurate, like spot on. Have you like encountered a challenge that your male peers haven't?
Probably many times. I think all of us have, by just being in this industry, where like you realize you're the only woman in the room, and it's sometimes it's not the end of the world. They're perfectly nice people, but it is the kind of thing where you're just like, I'm the only one like me here, and it's different because you're in Argentina, but like in the United States, I can be just like, I'm the only one here who might know another language. Everyone here is very white. Like it's just that kind of stuff. And those are very minor examples. I've also experienced some very intense harassment where people have made fake Twitter profiles of me or Facebook profiles of me or dating profiles of me. That was scary. Or make spammy GitHub commits to bug me. That kind of stuff is annoying. I've experienced a bunch of different things and it sucks. But luckily there have been so many positive things in the community that like I have good friends, I have a good network, I have a good group of people where when I'm frustrated, I can turn to them. And I think that's what's particularly important and why I love speaking at events like this one, Women Who Code, and other events like this, where a lot of times men, when they walk into a room, they are immediately comfortable because there's people like them. They don't have to worry about proving themselves at all because they don't have to. They automatically have that privilege. They automatically have that. And so if you have a community around you, that's something that we unfortunately have to work for. Men, they automatically have a community by being in this industry. We have to work for it a little bit more, but it's so powerful and it's so useful. And so groups like this one, groups like I'm in a few different Discord groups and Facebook groups and things like that. It's so valuable to have those kinds of people around you who will have your back, who will miss you when you're gone, who can help you when you need advice. That is definitely the most important thing to me in the industry, and that makes all the challenges worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It can get lonely sometimes, but that's why I also love communities so much.
Right.
So yeah, that's super accurate. So moving a little bit into another topic, you have like, yeah, moving fast, like turning the wheel. You have a huge following on Twitter. How did you make your personal brand? Like, how did you build it?
Good question, because it wasn't always that big. It happened very fast. Because for a long time I was on Twitter and I had an okay following. I had like 3,000 followers. I was happy with that. And I always liked sharing jokes, and I was very happy with my newsletter. I was putting out content and stuff. And then I started making TikToks, and then it exploded. And so I had gotten to a point where I was just like, wow, I have a lot of followers, because I had gotten to about 15,000 or so followers. And this was after being on Twitter for like 6 years or something, where I was mostly retweeting and sharing articles and blogs I wrote and stuff. And then in 2019, it was July 2019, I made my first TikTok. And I wanted to make fun of the term 10x engineers, because there's all of those tweets and things where it's just like, here's what you need in a 10x engineer. They don't sleep. They breathe your company. They love work and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, this is so dumb. So I wanted to make fun of that. And so my way of making fun of it, I was like, I want to make a video. Let me look at this TikTok app because it seems to have a good video editor. And it was great. I was able to film the video really, really quickly in a few minutes. And so I just tweeted it. It got a lot of likes. I was just like, oh, that's cool. And then the next week I thought of another joke and I was just like, yeah, I'll make another TikTok. This was fun. And between those two, my followers count started skyrocketing to the point where I was like, where's this going? And within 3 weeks, I got 60,000 followers, like a huge amount. And it was exciting, but kind of scary, because I was suddenly like, ooh, I gotta, I guess be careful about the jokes I make. I don't know. You have to think a lot more about what you say, because you can make a dumb joke and nobody will care. But if you make a dumb joke with a lot of followers, there will always be some people who take it seriously. And then it always ends up being annoying. You get a ton of DMs. It's a whole thing. And so anyway, the TikToks and the memes and the jokes are what made my following count grow a lot. But in terms of personal branding, coming back to the question, I think that there's a few things that you can do to brand yourself personally. And an important thing to do is to actually write it down. Don't just think about it, but actually write down a list of what are you good at? What are you not good at? What do you like? And what don't you like? Knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like and what you don't like. Because if you start actually writing this down, you could start figuring out, okay, how do I want to show it? And how do I want this to be who I am? Because it's just as important to know what you don't like as it is what you do like. Because, for example, I don't like C++. I've done my time. I never want to use that language again. God bless the people who like to write C++. I am not one of them. Anyway, that is on my list of things I do not want to do. And whenever I consider jobs, there have been a few cool jobs where I'm like, I'd have to write C++, but it would be a really cool role. I have to remind myself of my list. I don't want to do that. It will not be a good time for me. And so not just for jobs, but in the blog posts you write, the talks you give, the opportunities you take on, if you write down this list and know what you like, what you don't like and stuff, then you can kind of refine your focus and you can figure out, okay, what are the things that are worth my time? Because there's so many times where as you're growing in your career, you might think, oh, this would look good on my resume. It's not very fun, but it would look good on my resume. And as you are moving in your career a lot more, there's going to be lots of opportunities that come your way that might look good on your resume. And you need to know which ones to filter out, because you don't want to take on everything. You can't handle everything. None of us can. We try, we fail. You want to take on the ones that are interesting to you, that you would be good at, that play to your strengths, and that you would actually like to do. And by identifying those things for yourself, you can really start to focus that. And then by that point, when you write blog posts, you can write blog posts about the tech that you like. Or if, for example, someone like me, I really like writing jokes. I think jokes are so fun. I'm going to try to hide a joke in every single thing that I make. And that is kind of what ended up happening with my TikToks. Instead of hiding the joke, I went up front with it. And I was just like, let's make really big jokes and go for it. And when you play your strengths that way, your work becomes better because you're doing it with intention and with the things that you actually want to pursue.
Yeah, I think that when you do the stuff that you like, you do it 100 times better. Like it shows. So you started making jokes on TikTok, and one thing led to another, and you appeared on Good Morning America.
Yeah.
What was like? How did it happen?
Oh my gosh, that was something. So I'll explain what happened there. So because of the jokes and stuff, and because I have a bigger following now, I will sometimes get on calls and have meetings with people who I wouldn't normally get to chat with, or I'll talk with someone and get connected. Networking is great. Always message people. You never know. And so I was talking with this person who was interested in web monetization or something, some topic like that had nothing to do with anything. I was just talking to them, and as I was getting to know them, they were telling me about how they advise a bunch of startups, and they advise so many startups that they actually don't do a full-time job at a company anymore. They just advise startups. And I was like, ooh, that sounds kind of cool. I want to learn more about that. And I think that's the best part of networking is figuring out who you want to try to copy or mimic. And so this person, they told me about advising startups. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this a little bit. I need to figure out how, because really all I do is tell jokes, but you never know. And so I continued to, I do write a lot of blog posts, get plugged into the startup scene and stuff. And there was this company called Polywork that was in stealth that hadn't gone public yet. This was in August of last year. It's been a full year. And they had messaged me saying, hey, we love your videos. Do you want to do a video for us? And like that was just it. And I was just like, I don't, but I'm interested in doing advisory work. Maybe we could talk more about that. And it was truly just me asking, and it ended up being a really fun thing where we ended up talking and about what advising could look like. And in our particular case, it means I get on calls with them regularly. I help them with like Twitter Spaces events and talking with things and just helping improve the product. And now Polywork is launched and doing a lot of cool things. And Polywork, because they're doing a lot of cool things, there was a point where I was in Philadelphia with family, and we were doing a big Philadelphia cheesesteak tour. we got a van and we were just eating cheese steaks around the city. I was eating like my 4th cheesesteak, and I got a call saying, "Hey, will you be on Good Morning America tonight?" I was like, "I'm eating cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. What?" And basically Polywork was going to be featured in a segment, and they needed me to be on it. And I said, "Okay, I'm not home. I'll be flying in the morning. We could do it then." And they're just like, "No, this is really important." And so they booked me a hotel room next to the airport where I was going to be flying out, just so they could interview me for 15 minutes for a 1-minute segment where I think I spoke for about 10 seconds in the whole segment. And so it was the most chaotic thing, where I guess through the power of networking and talking about web monetization, I somehow figured out how to get this opportunity that ultimately ended up in me being on Good Morning America.
But it was a funny and nice experience.
Yeah. Oh, it was cool. Yeah, no, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. When they showed the segment, I was like, "You interviewed me for 20 minutes and you put 10 seconds of that? Okay. You bought me a hotel room for 10 seconds?" Like, that's showbiz, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how news anchors do this kind of stuff, or news organizations. But anyway, it was a very cool experience, and hopefully I can do similar things, maybe a little less stressful, where I don't have cheesesteak hanging out of my mouth at the same time.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned about the importance of having a network, because the next question is about how can someone build their own network?
And I actually just recorded a talk about this. And so here's my little minor networking thing. Developer Day, if you go to developerday.com, is a free conference, and I'm giving a keynote, and I'm talking a lot about this in that keynote. But anyway, if you want to build a network, it's really just a matter of talking to people and reaching out. Now, a lot of people think that networking is like going to a cocktail party and giving out your business card and schmoozing and that kind of stuff. And that might have been what networking was in the past, but it's not anymore. It's a very different thing now. Networking can start even just with your email signature, or your email signature can have your personal website in it and say, "Hey, if you want to chat about X, Y, or Z, email me here." Or, "If I'm looking for a job, contact me here. I'd love to speak at your event, contact me here." Something like that, just as simple as an email signature, can start. It can be a Zoom meetup. It could be updates posted to social media, or to LinkedIn, or to Polywork, or whatever. It could be sending a thank you note, where after you hear someone speak, or after you get a job interview with someone, sending them a thank you note afterwards. It could be a PR comment on open source. It could be chatting with someone on Discord. It could be just being a part of an online discussion. It could be moderating a community. It could be referring someone to a job. There's so many options. And that's what's exciting. It's almost too many options. Sometimes it's just like, oh, there's so much to do. You don't have to do all of them. Remember your list. Refine what you like to do and what you don't like to do. If you don't like public speaking, don't go that route. If you like writing, go the blog post route, that sort of thing. But being in a community, having a network, it just starts with reaching out. And there was this quote that I read from, it was the chairman of AT&T, the phone company, way back in 1908. He said, "A telephone without a connection to the other line, it's not a toy, it's not a scientific instrument, it is useless. It is one of the most useless things in the world. But if there's one other person on the other line, suddenly it's a tool. Suddenly it's something with a connection where you can actually talk to someone." And in this day and age where everything is very peer driven, if you want to network, you have to be kind of like a telephone. You can't just work in your own environment and stuff. You have to try to start making those connections to something else. We need to build our connections with each other to sustain ourselves in a community and build relationships. And relationships, it's not like me saying, "Hello, will you please be my mentor?" It's it can be much less casual. It's much more casual than that, where I could say, hey, thank you so much for that talk you gave. I think I could learn a lot from you. If you don't mind my asking, what does your resume look like? If you don't mind my asking, I'm in this situation. How do you think I should ask for a raise? Small little questions like that can lead to really, really awesome relationships. I have a mentor where in 2013, I met her at a hackathon where she was passing out business cards and we said, hey, and that was about it. I kept her business card and I was like, I'll send her a quick thank you note and say it was nice to meet her. I messaged her that was it. And then like 2 months later, I was like, I might ask her advice because she seemed to know what she was doing. And I asked her how I could ask for a raise, and we got on a call. And then there was a point where she said, hey, you actually are pretty good at this speaking thing. Would you mind helping MC this hackathon for me? And I was just like, yeah, sure. We ended up getting to know each other just by kind of having these casual conversations, to the point where I spoke at her 50th birthday party, and she gave me presents at my wedding. And we have this deep friendship that's lasted for years. And it started from simply messaging her saying, it was great to meet you. And so you never know what can happen from just having that tiny little correspondence. And so, like, for example, anyone here, I'm on Discord all the time. If you message me just saying, hey, it was great chatting with you on Discord, I'm going to message back. That doesn't mean we have to have a full-on relationship right away, but it starts a conversation, and someday we might chat about something, and it could be really, really powerful. And I think that that's something that it's nerve-wracking to think about, because you never know like what someone will say, but most people are nice. And someone who has a good network can send work your way or offer you a job. They can vouch for you or act as a reference for you. They could support your startup. They can encourage you to make a change. They can cheer you on and help you when you're struggling. They can provide access for people who need it. People can do that for you, and you can do that for people. And so if you are part of a community where you're continuously giving back, that community will continue to give to you. And it's really a very, very powerful thing. And I did want to say, like, whenever I do give this sort of advice, there's often a lot of people being just DMing me saying, will you please be my mentor? And starting to message everybody, trying to force relationships, saying, yes, let's be friends from now on. That unfortunately, we're adults. It's not like when you're a little kid on a playground saying, let's be friends now. We're best friends. That's not how relationships work. It's when you're an adult, you kind of have to build it that way. And checking off a list like transactions for relationships isn't how it works. You can say, hey, I'd like you to be my mentor. And I could say, I can happily answer you questions, but I don't know you. And so we've got to build that relationship. And humans are not formulas to crack. We're very flawed beings, and we can't manage to mentor everyone that comes our way, and we can't always learn the fastest. We can't always avoid disappointing people, but understanding that is very key to being a good networker, because there have been so many times where I have disappointed someone because I couldn't meet a schedule that they wanted, or I misunderstood how they were feeling in some kind of situation, or I misspoke, or I didn't act how they wanted me to act. And I feel terrible about that. And it makes networking really hard. It genuinely can be hard work, harder than any coding problem that we might solve. But again, internalizing that and knowing that makes you better at it. And it's something that you can practice over time and get really good at. And it encourages empathy within yourself and with the people around you. And relationships take time, and they can't be hacked. They take work, but they're worth it. And so I highly recommend, like, everybody here, message people and look up people's names, and even just say, hey, I saw you were at this event. I hope you had a good time. I liked this part. Cassidy's hilarious. Wow, isn't she good looking? Something like that. I think you'd all send something like that, right? But I'm kidding. I mean, am I? It's so worth it, because you never know what could come out of it.
Yeah, I think you never know. It's like the big phrase that sums up everything. But also I think like for introverts like me, it's kind of like a nightmare messaging someone, but it's
scary.
so worth it. Like you don't realize until you see it. And so yeah, I recommend that everyone there, like having a hard time messaging someone or being part of a community or participating in events, like do it.
Yeah, it's so worth it. I'm very introverted too. It's very nerve-wracking for me to be just like, hello, you want to be friends? Like it's scary. But if you start with just a few sentences here and there, that's easy. I can ask someone how they liked an event all day long. And then over time the relationships can build, and it's absolutely worth it. It's kind of like a lot of people say that phrase, what's the worst that could happen? Something doesn't go well. But I think with networking, it's more like, what's the best that could happen? Because you never know if this person might end up being one of your closest friends. You don't know if this person might get you your dream job. You don't know if you might get that person their dream job. You never know what might be able to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you also you recommended a book about networking.
Yes, Build Your Dream Network. I can put it in the chat. I'll Google it really quick.
Yeah, I have it on my list. Someday I will read it. I have too much stuff on my plate right now, but
I understand completely. It is a great book. I just put it in the chat to everyone. Highly, highly recommend this book. And I met this author at a hackathon. There you go. You never
would you
know.
look at that?
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, you read their book and
there you go.
Well, I'm going to change the topic a little bit. I'm going to turn the wheel around again. And this is a topic that I know that you love, and it's mechanical keyboards.
Hello,
I think that you can
yes.
talk about that for like 24 hours. Yeah, we can see behind you like your collection.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know if it was because of networking or how you ended up there, but for April's Fools, you had with Stack Overflow, like the keyboard for developers.
Yeah, so that was, oh man. Okay, so for those who didn't see, for April Fools this year, Stack Overflow made a keyboard where everybody used to joke there's like a meme where the only keyboard you need is a Control-C, Control-V or Command-C, Command-V keyboard that copies and pastes. And I have been writing the Stack Overflow newsletter for a few years now. I actually helped them start it, and I do their podcast and stuff. And so I had this relationship with Stack Overflow, and there was a point where they just messaged me and they said, so you like keyboards, right? And I was like, hello, yes, I do. Please keep going. And so they said, okay, we have this idea for a prank. We don't know if it'll be possible, but what if we made that meme keyboard that just copies and pastes? And I was just like, absolutely, yes, let's do it. But this was at the beginning of March. And so we had 1 month to make a real keyboard that we could share. And so it was kind of chaos. I had a relationship with drop.com already because I've designed some other keycaps before. And so I reached out to them and I said, okay, we want to make this keyboard. What do you think? And they're just like, yeah, I think we could do it. Stack Overflow is a cool company. Let's try to make it work. And so I designed the case. I literally whipped out my 3D modeling software, which I hadn't used in years, to design a case. I designed the keycaps. I got color samples and everything. You know, I'm moving right now. Otherwise, I'd be able to show you the keyboard, but I have it with me. And we were able to, just before April Fools, I think literally 3 days before April Fools, I got the keyboard, and it was just this 3-key keyboard that copied and pasted. And then they said, okay, but the thing is, you're the only one with this keyboard in the world. We need product photos. And so they ended up shipping me like a little light box. And so I just got my camera right here and took photos of it in this light box to make it look like professional photos. And then meanwhile, on their website, they made a joke where they wanted to make it where every time you did copy and paste, it would say, you have 3 free copies left. And people started panicking, and then you could buy the keyboard and get unlimited copies and pastes. Silly joke. But anyway, so they built that part. I did the keyboard and the photos and stuff. And then we combined all of our marketing power. And then we made some product videos for it. Then we recorded a podcast for it, wrote a blog post, and shipped it all just in time. And it was chaos, but we made it happen. That's how that keyboard came to be. And we're almost, this is like mildly secret, which I'm telling this large group of people, just don't like tweet it too aggressively. We're going to make it real, where people can actually for real buy that keyboard, and we'll be manufacturing it and stuff. And so that's going to be very fun. And we're in the final stages of getting the electronics working. So it's going to be programmable and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's like the most Cassidy thing ever, like a joke about mechanical keyboards related with programming, like
on Stack Overflow. Yeah, it was such a fun project to do. It was definitely one where I was so happy that I got to be a part of it, because it's a rare opportunity to combine all the things that you like.
Yeah, it's like a merge of everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, and what's like your favorite keyboard, or which is the one that like you use the most?
Oh man, they're all my babies. I'll show off the one that I'm using right now, because this is the one that I use whenever I live stream. And so this keyboard right here, it's a board that I built, and it took me about 2 years to build this keyboard. And it's because of all of the different parts in it. So first of all, the switches are silenced. And so 1 second, I'll put it up to the microphone. ASMR. So super, super quiet, right? So they're really, really quiet switches. The keycaps are SA Oblivion, which it was basically just a gray and white set, but then they had some special, like the blue key and stuff here that I was able to do. And then this number row, I actually got separately through a bunch of grab bags. I used to volunteer with this organization that basically taught kids in underrepresented groups how to solder with keyboards. And so we had a bunch of keycaps. And so I just gathered tons and tons of grab bags of keycaps until I got a red number row. And then the actual board itself, it's a programmable board with LEDs. You can't see it because I unplugged it. It's actually pretty heavy, like 4 pounds, like two kilograms. Is that right?
Yeah.
Conversions are
Yes.
hard. Sorry, I use
think
freedom units. But yeah, anyway, I got the board actually in Korea. Like I went to South Korea, and I was going there to visit family, not for keyboards. The keyboard was just an added bonus that I was very excited about. So anyway, all of these powers combined, and I built this keyboard, and it's my baby. And it has the Vim keys on it too. HKJL right there. See how it has arrows?
Oh, that's really cool.
So fun. I love this keyboard. I can do a full run through of my other keyboards, but we might run out of time.
Yeah, and how did you begin like with this hobby?
Yeah, so honestly, I just wanted a keyboard that looked cool on my desk. I thought it'd be fun to just have a cool looking keyboard. And I found the subreddit, the mechanical keyboard subreddit, and I just started searching. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many keyboards out there. Okay, I'll just get one. And I loved it. It was a great keyboard, and I was so excited about it. And then when I got this keyboard, talking about networking and how people lead to everything, one of my coworkers, it turns out he was really into mechanical keyboards. And I didn't realize it until I got mine. He started asking me questions about it. And I went to his desk, and he had a keyboard that was custom 3D printed, where he made the switches himself. And like, it was a really, really custom keyboard that no one will ever be able to buy. And he basically just taught, I asked him tons of questions, and he told me a ton. And I learned so much about keyboards from him. I was just like, okay, I'm going to start building keyboards. This sounds great. Then I moved. This was when I was living in New York, and then I moved to Seattle. And in Seattle, there is a huge mechanical keyboards community, one that I didn't even know existed until I moved there, because I found out one day on the subreddit that there was a Seattle mechanical keyboard meetup. I was like, oh, fun, I can play on keyboards. And it got huge in the time that I was going to this meetup, and I ended up helping with the organization that helped organize that meetup. And I think we had like 300 people come, with hundreds of keyboards that you could play with. And it was so fun, just so many people and so many keyboards. And as you play with different keyboards, you could be like, okay, I want that one. I want that one. I might get rid of this one to replace that one. And you could trade parts and stuff. It was a blast. And so honestly, just between my coworker telling me things and then me starting to go with this meetup and being involved in that group, I fell in deep with keyboards. And now I'm actually working on an online course that shows people how to build mechanical keyboards. So soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's very overwhelming. I was like, okay, maybe I want to get into mechanical keyboards. And when you look it up, you have different like the cases, the switches, the keycaps. Then you can like add more stuff, customize it.
It's a lot.
So much.
Yeah. It's a lot, but it's so fun. And I understand how overwhelming it is because I've been there and because the hobby has grown so much in the past few years. Because I've been involved with this hobby for like 6 years now. And just in the past like 2 or 3, especially in the pandemic when everyone is at home using their home keyboards, they're like, oh, I might as well. It's just exploded, which has been very exciting, but it can be super overwhelming too.
Yeah, it's kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream now. Like a lot of people are using it. And yeah, I know that I like 2 years ago, I have never heard of a mechanical keyboard, but now I'm on Twitter and I read about it every time.
It's so fun.
Yeah, so someday I'll get one, but yeah, someday.
Eventually. I'll help you. DM me.
I will. So yeah, let's move now into the more technical part of the Q&A. So this one is about work-related stuff. Where do you feel the most comfortable, like working in a startup or in big companies like Feng? And what are the advantages and disadvantages?
Startups. I am a startup girl. I love startups. And I don't blame people who like big companies because I think it takes all kinds of personalities to go to different ones. For example, my sister and I both worked together at a startup and we both worked together at Amazon. And so we've both seen both and know what we like. My sister, she loves working at the FANG companies. Are they called FanMag now because Microsoft is in there? I don't know. Anyway, she has worked at Microsoft, at Google, at Apple, at Amazon, and now she's at Facebook. So she's been at only those big fancy companies. Meanwhile, I've been at all startups with the exception of Amazon, which I didn't like it and I left. And so it does take different personalities for both. For myself, I really like doing a lot of side projects, doing a lot of speaking and being able to be creative a lot with my work. And at startups, it's required that you're like that. And so I really like that kind of environment because at a startup, it might not be your job to update the copy of the website or something, but somebody's got to do it. So you might as well do it. And so you have to wear a lot of different hats and that's how it works. Meanwhile, at the large companies, they have a lot of structure. You are pretty much guaranteed to be successful at your job as long as you do the work that's expected of you. And so stay in your lane, do your work. You can go above and beyond in different ways, but kind of stick to the script. And I think that's where it can vary, where, for example, my sister, she's doing awesome things at Facebook with Oculus and open source stuff. She really loves being able to have a very structured environment where there's lots of rules in place where she can be like, I can be creative and have these boundaries. And so I won't ever get too stressed because there are boundaries here. But at the same time, she doesn't really work on side projects and do a lot of external things. But that being said, it doesn't interest her. She doesn't like doing those kinds of side projects. She likes doing her job and then after work, not thinking about work, which is normal. For myself, I really like working on projects, doing public speaking, doing live streaming, doing a lot of stuff outside of work. And as a result, I need to be in an environment that lets me do that and gives me the mental space to do that. And I really like, for example, teaching a lot of developers. And there's some companies where they're just like, you shouldn't be teaching and giving these workshops and stuff unless the company is making money off of it and stuff like that. And I don't like that. And so I definitely prefer the smaller startup environment where there's not as many politics, and I don't have to care about like, oh, because that manager doesn't like that manager, I have to be careful who I talk to when it comes to this. I ran into a lot of that at Amazon, and it was frustrating. And that's not all companies and all teams, but it is something that inevitably happens just because of how humans are and how large groups of people work. And so there are definitely pros and cons, because I do stress out a lot because I probably do a few too many things. And because there's not a lot of structure, sometimes things fall through. And again, it's not my job to update the website, but I have to update the website because nobody else can do it because everyone else is putting out fires. There's pros and cons to both, and it really depends on what you thrive in and what appeals most to you.
Yeah, I think in Spanish we kind of have a phrase for that, which is sobre gustos no hay nada escrito, which means that some people like some things and some people like some other things, and they're both okay. And it's just like a matter of taste.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so that's how it is for big companies. A lot of people think that they have to work at one of the FANGs, the fan mags, whatever, to be a legitimate developer and look good on your resume. You don't. There are very successful developers who have never touched one of those companies. It's really just a matter of what does success look like to you. And this is where, again, the personal branding thing comes back into play. When you know what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you aren't good at, you can figure out what does success look like to you, and where do you want to be, and how do you want to set your own goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And would you rather work at a software factory or a product company?
I like both. I think it kind of depends on the job. What's nice about, like, for example, Netlify, I like that the people that I work for are developers. Like, all of the things that I work on are specifically for developers. If I were to ever switch jobs, it would only be for a place where developers are my customers, quote unquote, because that's what I like to do. Yeah, that's how I feel about that.
And well, speaking of Netlify, why did you choose that company?
Yeah, so I interviewed at a few different places, and there's so many cool companies in the world. It was kind of tough. And so for people who don't know, I actually was teaching coding full time before the pandemic. And then it's hard to teach in person when there's no persons in front of you. And so my company had to lay off everybody. And so that's what led me to look for a job. And it was my first time looking for a job in that way, where it was kind of just tweeting and seeing what would happen, and taking lots of interviews. I think that I have a notebook. I interviewed, I think, with like 30 different companies. I talked with a lot of places. I just was applying a lot and figuring out what I wanted to do. And first of all, I ended up saying no to companies where I would be doing just software engineering. I like the idea of writing React code and stuff. I do that a lot at work, but I wanted to be able to, again, do a lot of community work where I could speak a lot with developers. And so that got rid of a lot. I wanted to be able to move up into leadership, maybe not necessarily have it be my whole job, because I do like coding, but I wanted to have that ability. And I wanted to have a good culture and a good team. And it ultimately came down to just a handful of companies that were really interesting to me at the time. And a couple of those companies, they were cool. But for example, one of them, they had like one woman working there out of 40. And I was just like, that I'm sure everyone is a very nice person, but I don't want to be in that kind of environment. I want to be on a team that's more diverse. And there were some companies where they're just like, well, we don't have a lot of organization with regards to this. I think a lot of your job will be defining our company culture for us, and kind of just keeping the CEO in check. I was like, that does not sound like what a developer does. That's what a HR team and a people team does. And so that kind of stuff, there were a lot of things that I ended up pushing out of the way. And so ultimately I ended up going with Netlify because it was a diverse team. It was a good culture, and it was really cool work where I would get to work with developers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see like in Twitter that there are a lot of people that are part of Netlify and they love the culture and the team. When you're looking for a job and you don't know the company, how can you measure like the culture and the people working there? Because it's like you're an outsider and you don't see what's really going in there.
Yeah. Honestly, I think you can just DM people, and it's kind of intimidating to do and stuff. But like, if someone were to message me saying, could you tell me what Netlify is really like? I'll tell you, like, it is not a perfect place. There are certain things I don't like, and I'm happy to talk about them because if you want to work here, I want you to know what's happening so you're not blindsided when you actually join. Netlify is a lovely place. There are some things I like, some things I don't like. There you go. I think that's really a great gauge. And so, for example, at some companies I've worked for where like my entire interview panel has been men, and they'll say, okay, do you have any questions for me? I'll just say, can I talk to a woman? And there have been times where even like in an in-person interview, they're like, I guess. And I was just like, yeah, I just want to talk to a woman because I haven't yet today. And they're just like, oh, to go find one. And like, it's something that I've just had to do. But whether you do it virtually or you do it in person, finding someone who's kind of like you is really, really useful for gauging a company environment. And so like, for example, one company that I actually ended up working for, and the company based in Argentina, Globant.
Oh yeah.
They actually bought that company that I worked for. I worked at a small creative agency, and then Globant bought them. And so I was a Glober for a little bit. But anyway, when I joined that company, I had a full interview panel of men, and I was like, okay, everyone was nice, but can I talk to a lady? And they brought one over, and I talked with her, and I was just like getting a read on culture and stuff, asking her questions. And she was great about answering all of them. And she said, honestly, this is a really great environment. Yes, there's a lot of dudes, but here's what we do to try to improve the culture. Here's some of the things that we try to do to improve diversity. And honestly, they're all so nice, and I haven't been made uncomfortable yet. I think you'll be okay. And just asking makes a world of a difference. It is very hard to see if you're just basing it on tweets, but if you ask someone specifically, they'll give you an honest answer most of the time.
Yeah, networking, more networking.
Yes, it's all networking in the end.
Everything is networking, like the meme. And what technologies do you use at Netlify?
Oh my gosh, we use too many, I think, honestly. So in the company as a whole, we use a lot. I myself pretty much always use React, sometimes Next.js. I've used Astro a bunch, but that's just me. At Netlify as a whole, our backend is in Ruby, Go, and Rust. And so if you like one of those three languages, we got a place for you. I know that like I think the original parts of it were in Ruby on Rails, and they're trying to move it to more Go microservices, and then Rust for some of the edge handler type work. And then on the front end, depending on the team you're on, the teams that you're on kind of decide what you work on. And so some parts of the company, they use just React, and then some parts of the company, they use React and TypeScript. Some parts of the company use React, TypeScript, Tailwind, or some combo of those. Some parts of the company use Vue. Some parts of the company use Vue and Eleventy. Some parts of the company use React and Next. We use so many different technologies. And so it really varies from team to team, but I think I've listed the languages that we all use.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's fun because then there have been people where they ask if they can do a rotation on another team. And so one person, she actually left my team to go do rotation because she wanted to learn Rust on one of the backend teams. And she's still there. She ended up saying, I don't want to make this a rotation. I want to be here full time. And so now she's a Rust developer. And so it makes for some interesting switches. And I think that's where it's nice to be at a startup that's flexible like that, where they say, yeah, go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of technologies, nowadays React is used by millions of developers, and there are a lot of job postings that are looking for developers that know that library. I know that you don't know the future, but what do you think may be like the next React?
Ooh, that's a good question, because I do think Vue is making a lot of traction. Like, it is nowhere near as big as React is. It still has quite a bit of catching up to do, but it's because it's very community run and open and stuff. React is run by Facebook, and Vue is run by the community. There are pros and cons to both when it comes to like a decision maker, like a CTO deciding what technologies to use. Because if I were to put on a CTO hat and look at the two, I could be just like, well, if React is run by Facebook, that means it's going to be maintained by professionals who are paid full time. It's not going anywhere. But then I could also look at it and be just like, this Vue thing, it isn't owned by this company, Facebook, that could shut it down at any time. It's run by the community. And maybe if I sponsor it, I could help guide its direction a little bit. There's a lot of pros and cons to these kinds of frameworks and stuff. And I've seen a lot of these frameworks out there that are run by startups that use VC money. And so like Gatsby, like Next.js, there's so many out there. And these frameworks are good. And again, they have full-time employees working with salaries on these frameworks. And it's a powerful thing. But ultimately, it's the VCs saying, hey, we want these kinds of things coming out of the framework. Or, hey, what's the business model? And if something is a little too tied to a company, that's where you start to get locked into that company instead of being more open. And so this is kind of a very roundabout answer to your question. I think the next React, I do think it's going to be more community driven, but we need to fund open source better so that it can continue to be community driven and not run by a company where if the company decides to change the direction and sometimes they change the framework, you have to suddenly change your code in some way.
Yes, for the funding the open source project. Yeah. I remember that last year, I don't know which project, but there was like a huge project that was run like only by one person, and they had to shut it down, and there was like thousands of people using it. Yeah. And they were like very disappointed, but we are like, it was like a side project. It wasn't like their full-time job. So
right. And that's so many libraries out there. And even I mentioned Next.js before I worked there. Pretty much the only way to use Next.js on Netlify was using an open source project called Next on Netlify. And it was just a side project for this one guy who was just like, yeah, I like Next and I like Netlify. So I wanted to use them together. And we at the company really liked it, but we didn't know what to do. And so what we ended up doing was we sponsored the guy. We gave him a certain amount of money per month to help maintain it. And we hired some people internally to help him maintain it. And then we ended up absorbing the project so that way it isn't needed anymore. And it's just built into the company right now. It's very cool that he did that and that a community contribution could affect the product so much. But if he had just decided, before we started sponsoring him, it might not have been possible. And so a lot of technologies are very dependent on the goodwill of people who have these projects in open source. And I do want to do a little plug for this startup I discovered recently, and I'll put it in the chat, called Floss Bank. And it's pretty cool where it funds open source projects by putting an ad in your terminal whenever you npm install. And so if I'm npm installing React or whatever, it shows just an ad while it installs instead of it doing the regular terminal output or whatever. And then the money generated from that ad goes towards the open source maintainers. And so it has a really cool funding model in that way. And so again, there's so many ways that we haven't figured out how to fund open source, but I thought this was a cool one that is new that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I've never heard of that, so I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah.
For example, I have never contributed to open source, and I really like it, and I agree with you. Like there are flaws in our system. Like
Yeah.
we use open source, but people don't want to fund it.
Yeah.
So how can we help open source or contribute more to projects?
Yeah. And so if you aren't contributing financially, honestly, the best way to get started is to go through the issues, because a lot of the really big open source projects have lots and lots of issues, tons and tons of issues. But the maintainers, they don't have time to triage every issue and add labels to every single one. That's really, really hard work. And they're busy doing the code and trying to fix certain issues that are high priority. Something that is a really, really great way to get started is to go through issues and say, I can verify this is the thing. It should probably have these labels. And just doing something small like that, because then the maintainer doesn't have to try to duplicate the issue, try to figure out how or reproduce the bug, and then add all of the labels and then assign it to a person's stuff. If you just do that quick reproduction and suggest tags, so helpful, enormously helpful. And then the other thing, if you actually do want to write code, is writing tests. There's so many open source projects out there where they have like 50% test coverage. They want to do more, but they have to work on features. Write a test and kind of write the code that you want to see in the world. I don't know if you've seen the database company Supabase.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, Supabase. It's like an open source Firebase, and I'll drop a link to that in the chat as well. 1 second. So what was cool about Supabase is, it's not letting me type in Zoom chat. So just know that it's Supabase. Supabase.
Yeah, I'll link to it.
It's very hard for me to spell in Spanish. Anyway, yes. They did a whole release recently where they're saying, hey, we added this authentication thing where you can now log in with Discord. Someone in the community wanted that and they built it. Like they made an issue. They said, hey, we kind of want this. And they said, okay, love the idea, but we're busy implementing this other stuff in the company and in the database. And so someone in the community built it and they suddenly have this feature now. And I think that's such a cool thing for people to be able to do in open source. You just have to make sure that there's an issue for it and you're not just suddenly showing up and saying, hey, I built this, and they don't know who you are. It's kind of like what I was saying before. Build a relationship a little bit, mess around with the issues, write some tests, and then say, okay, I've noticed with all these things, I'd like to implement this. If that's cool with you, let's do it. Because you don't want to be just like someone walking into your house and saying, oh, I cleaned your bathroom. Like, that would be weird. I don't know you. Why did you clean my bathroom? I just wanted you to hang out. Like, it's kind of like that. Go check out the open source project, see how features are implemented, get to know it a little bit, help on issues, and then look at how features can be built.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'll take it, definitely.
Yeah.
And then how can an experienced React developer go to the next level and improve their skills? Like, for example, I don't know, I've learned React, I know how to use it, I've made a few projects with it. How can I improve and make myself better?
Yeah. And so that's a hard question because I don't know what projects you made or anything like that. But I would say the next step is building a library with it. A lot of people are just like, oh yeah, I'll build a to-do app and it'll have authentication. Or, oh yeah, I'll make this little thing here and there. Making something that developers can use with React, I think, is a very, very different mindset that lets you really know the framework. There's this one framework called Reach UI. Oh my gosh, I can type in Zoom chat again. Okay, reach.tech. Reach UI is a React library that's implemented with TypeScript, and it's just for making accessible React components. Going through that source code, a lot of it isn't even React. It's just JavaScript that they then wrapped in React, but it's such a powerful library because they thought about the accessibility of all the different components. Try to think about how you can build some kind of component library for other developers, because I think that is the thing that that'll make you a really advanced developer, because you have to think of use cases where someone is going to write some funky code with your library and you have to deal with it. And you have to implement the guardrails. You have to think of all of the different use cases that you might run into. And so that's probably the next step, I would say. If you aren't, or if you're kind of done making projects, you feel intermediate level, build something like, let's just say, an accordion component, where you've got like a thing that can open and close and you have a whole list of things. You have to think about, okay, someone might be clicking on this with their mouse. Someone might be tapping on this with their phone. Someone might want multiple things open, multiple things closed. How do I implement a component that's extensible where a React developer can drop it in, add their properties or whatever, and use it in the most flexible way possible and get it live? And it'll really help you understand the intricacies of it. And it'll lead to you probably making your own framework at some point, which everyone laughs about, making yet another JavaScript framework, but it's a great learning curve, and it really helps you understand a lot.
Yeah, I think that's like the best answer ever. You started with, I don't know how to answer this, and then you finish with the
happens as I talk too much.
Now moving into a little bit more for junior developers, what advice would you give to someone who is on their first steps of their developer journey?
Well, networking. It's a big really just getting to know people. It's so important, because there's so many people I know where they are starting to learn how to code. They're kind of not sure how they want to go about it, but they're just gonna keep learning, and you can only get so far on your own. You can apply places and you might get a job, but if you have people who support you and you have a community around you, that is so much exponentially better. And I'll give an example of my father-in-law, actually. And so my father-in-law, he moved to the United States from Korea when he was young. My husband was a toddler, and he was just like, okay, I'm going to study and I'm going to become a software developer in the United States. He was very excited to do that. And then long story short, he wasn't able to finish because Joe's mom got sick. And so he had to drop out of school to take care of the family, and he wasn't able to study. Fast forward many years, a few decades later, he's in his 50s and he says, I really want to try learning how to code again. And so he started looking at online courses, the MIT free courses, the Udemy courses, YouTube courses, and he just started teaching himself how to code. It was super fun for him, but he was not sure how he was going to get a job, because he was learning a lot, taking a lot of these steps, but he wasn't doing the community aspect of it. And so he was kind of learning, and then he was like, I guess I could try to apply places, but he wasn't really getting anywhere. And it was kind of stressing him out because English wasn't his first language, and he was coding for the first time and starting over in his life. It's hard. And then we're just like, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have you tweet every day just once. With the hashtag 100 days of code, just once every day, say, this is what I learned today. This is the job that I applied to today, and just start putting it out there. And slowly but surely, there started to be people saying, oh, good job, good for you, and stuff on tweets, because he was continuing to put it out there. It did take a long time for him. It was particularly hard because of the language barrier and because he's older and ageism is a very real thing. But last year in 2020, he got his first junior developer job. And it was at a very small company, but he got it because he tweeted saying, I'm looking for a job. Here's my journey. Here's what I've learned. Please help me out. It was such a stressful time, but he got his first job and he did great in it. He's been doing so great, so much so, in fact, that he just got a job offer from Microsoft last week. And he's going to be working at Microsoft now. I know, we were crying everywhere. It was so exciting. And it truly was the power of him continuing to reach out to people, doing that one tweet a day, and just slowly building up this community for himself that really got him to different places. And he had such a hard time, but trust me, if he can do it, anybody can do it, because there's such an opportunity here, especially for a lot of us who did grow up with technology and stuff who aren't learning the basics of a lot of things, who already know how to copy and paste in emails and that kind of stuff. Like, we already have such a leg up in that regard. And so networking and building that community and using it to your advantage is absolutely huge.
Yeah, I love how like a little thing can grow into getting an offer from Microsoft. Like
it's again, it's a snowball. It starts really, really small, but then it grows over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think networking is super powerful, and you just keep proving it.
Yeah.
Well, these are like the last couple of questions. We're almost done. We know that you interview a lot of people at Netlify.
Yeah.
What do you expect in an interview, and how do you qualify if someone is fit for a job position?
So, great question. Job interviewing, I will say, it hurts my heart because I want to hire everybody, even if they're not good, just because I'm just like, I'll give you your opportunity and you'll do great. Unfortunately, that is not possible. So the interview process can look different at various different companies. And I've been on both sides of the interviewing table a lot of times. And so, first of all, when you are applying, depending on the company that you apply to, it will look different. And so at really large companies, like, again, the fan mag companies like the Microsofts and the Googles and stuff, they will almost always have some kind of recruiter call. Then they'll have technical screens where you might have 1 or 2 calls with engineers, and then you'll have an on-site. And the on-site will either be in person or over video, where you'll just go through a full day of interviewing and talking with people, and it'll be mostly technical interview questions. If you're doing Microsoft, they love binary search trees. Get good at binary search trees, you can get a job at Microsoft. The end. Anyway, so that's typically what the process is like. At startups, it varies because it tends to be a little bit more practical, where a startup isn't just like, can you generally problem solve and use these algorithms? Great. At startups, it's just like, we need someone who knows how to build this microservice because we don't know what we're doing. And so there, it tends to be a lot more practical. And so with those, what I typically see, it's like a hiring manager screen, some technical screens, a recruiter screen, some kind of on-site, but the questions are less about algorithms and much more about specific technologies. At Netlify in particular, I really like our interview process, where what we do is we have a hiring manager call, we have a recruiter call, sometimes flipped, depends on things. And then after that, for the technical screen, we actually tell you what the question's going to be ahead of time. And so we tell you what the technical question is going to be, and we say, also bring a code sample that you're proud of or that you found particularly challenging. And so then in the technical round, we give you the question that we told you to prepare for. You solve it in front of us, and then you show us the code sample and we talk through it together. If you do well in that, sometimes that's just 1 call, sometimes it's 2, depends on timing. Then you have 2 or 3 calls with the team just to figure out how you work, what you like to do, and you're done. That's our interview process. And so when I look for people, I typically look for someone who does know the particular technologies that we're working with, but also just, you can't learn a lot from someone's resume, which is why I always say write a cover letter, because I read all cover letters that come my way, just in case there's something I might need to know. But also, when I'm in an actual interview, I look for someone who can communicate well. And so, like, for example, when you're whiteboarding or something, instead of just saying, okay, what's the question? Write a URL shortener, great. And then just starting to write, talk about how you would implement this URL shortener, talk about how you would put together this algorithm, how you would build this page and stuff. After having that dialogue with the interviewer, then start writing it down on the whiteboard or coding in front of you. Because if you can communicate it first and have that dialogue going, then there have been times where I've done that, and I'll start typing or writing something, and the interviewer will say, didn't you say you were going to implement it the other way? And I'll be like, oh my gosh, you're right. And then I'll implement it the way that I meant to. And so they can end up helping you more, and you have more of a dialogue. And it helps you from kind of getting too caught in the weeds. And if you talk it out a little bit and develop that conversation, it makes you a little less nervous too. And so that's typically how I say people should interview. I'm looking for someone who can clearly explain their ideas. If you can't solve a technical problem, I don't mind that as much. If you got close, that's totally fine with me. I want to see what your mindset was when you were solving that problem.
Yeah, I think communication is a soft skill that's just as important as programming, especially right now with remote work.
Yeah.
In which you can like tap the shoulder of your coworker and tell them something. You have to tell them, like, you have to write it down. And if they don't understand you, they will ask you, like, what did you mean?
Right. Yeah. I've even started calling them not even soft skills, but core skills, because it's something you always have to have. And it's so important. And yeah, if you've got those, that's so helpful for any job interviews you might be going into.
Yeah, they're so important, and they don't teach that at boot camps or school.
Yeah.
So it's really something that you learn with networking.
Yeah. Well, and also just practicing interviewing is really, really helpful, because interviewing is a completely separate skill from coding.
Yes.
It's really, really challenging. I know some people who got straight A's in university, but couldn't interview for their lives. They were just really bad at interviewing. I always tell people, apply to all the jobs, every job you can find, even if you don't feel like you're ready, even if it's not a company that interests you. Because first of all, who knows, maybe it is a company that interests you in the end, but also it's just really, really good practice, because the more interviews that you do, the better you get at it, just because you're continuing to practice those skills.
Yes, I agree. You can be the best developer there is, but you may not be able to handle an interview, and you won't be able to get a job.
Right.
So,
well, and there's also so many people get discouraged because they've applied to like 20 jobs, but they still haven't gotten one. A lot of times it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes the company just changes the requirements, or someone else was hired first because of the way they moved around the pipeline and stuff. And so it is really hard to not get discouraged, but keep your head up and keep applying, because it's a numbers game. It's kind of like if you keep filling out lottery tickets, or if you keep filling out raffle tickets, maybe not the lottery, but if you keep filling out raffle tickets, eventually you might win a prize. And if you keep applying for lots and lots of jobs, you'll eventually get a job.
yeah, job hunting is a skill, and it's very hard.
It's a full-time job to look for a full-time job.
Yeah, and also like there's this issue that interviews are very different depending on where you interview. Like we don't have like one type of interviews, we have like 10.
Yeah.
So we have to prepare for all case scenarios.
It's exhausting. But again, with practice, you'll end up hitting all of them, and you never know.
Yes, it's in the end it's all worth it. So yeah, just keep working on your skills.
Yeah.
So I think we have the last question here. Chan, chan, chan. How should someone prepare for a technical interview? This is all related to what we just talked about, maybe just something that you want to add.
Yeah, it's what we just talked about. Plus, I have a guide that I wrote, and I just dropped that in the chat. I have a guide that I wrote that talks about preparing for the technical interview with cover letters and resumes and stuff. I send this to everybody who asks me these kinds of things. Truly, I think the best thing that I've ever done for myself is doing a mock interview and just having a friend interview me, or someone in my community interview me, and then give me really honest feedback and saying, like, you're really bad at binary trees. If you want a job at Microsoft, you got to get those. Or just saying, you kind of stumble whenever you talk about this subject, you should be clear on that. Or you are fuzzy on these sorts of definitions, make sure you know how to say the difference between call, apply, and bind in JavaScript. I don't know, whatever. Having someone actually practice with you is the best way to prepare. And it doesn't even have to be a very technical person. You could even just, there have been times where I've given like my mom a note card with some questions on it, and I have her ask me things, and then she can just say like, well, I don't know the answer, but you sounded confident, or you should figure out your story for this kind of question, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and also if you don't know anyone, you can reach for someone in a community and be like, hey, I need help with this. And I'm sure that someone will reply to you like, oh yeah, you know what? I make interviews at this company and I know how to handle this, so we can practice together.
Right. Yeah, there's so many communities that do that. I admit I do it through my Patreon, and so people can be on my Patreon and do the mock interviews. I had to do it that way because I was doing it too much and had no time. But there's so many communities. I recommend the Scrimba community as well, the online class Scrimba. Just dropped that in the chat as well. They do a lot of mock interviews, and you can even watch mock interviews too to see how people interview and the feedback they get as well.
Yeah, I think you have a course or two in Scrimba about React interviews.
Yeah, exactly. I do a React interview course and then a React components course too.
Great. So you should all check that out. Everyone here. So yeah, I think those are all of our questions. Cassidy, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I can't believe I'm talking to you. I can't believe you're here. I think that you really inspired me, and like it's great seeing like another woman who knows React, who makes jokes, who knows Spanish, like I don't know, whatever. It's just like great having you here. So yeah, thank you for your time. Hopefully in the future we might have another event with you, who knows.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so great talking with you and seeing you again and being able to just chat with everybody. I've seen your emojis that you've sent and I love all of them. Thank you. But yeah, hopefully someday we'll all be able to meet in person, but until then it was great chatting with all of you online.
Yes, you are having some messages on the chat.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for being here, Cassidy.
If you're in Buenos Aires, just let us know.
Yeah, I want to get some yerba mate and all that.
And dulce de leche.
The real stuff down there. Yeah.
Real. Okay.
Okay. Gracias a todos.
Adiós.
Gracias.